I have no idea how we're going to explain this so it's understandable, but this is not a parking lot. This historical square in the center of our town, believe it or not, used to be a big parking lot. In 1966, cars were parked all around here. But I'm sure you are aware of the trend where cities all around the world are changing from car-friendly to people-friendly. But our city, Prague, has some examples where it's going the other way around, where they changed a park into a parking lot, or sometimes even a sporting ground into a large parking lot. But first we're going to show you the positive changes. That's why we are here on Old Town Square in Prague. The tool we're using for today's videos are old aerial maps of Prague. And we actually have maps from 1966. So if we go above now, you can see what it looked like, only black and white. And if we switch to today, you can see that it kind of looks much better. Now let's go to another example, which is a square just over there. We are on the Republic Square, Náměstí Republiky, and if we look at historical aerial maps, you can see that this was a busy car intersection and also a big parking lot. But then in 2006, the city reconstructed this place and it turned into this large pedestrian zone with only trams and buses allowed to go through. So the main form of transportation is still allowed, but you may be wondering, but where do people park now? Well, there's a new underground parking garage with more than 600 parking spaces. So that's solved. We are on the little square, Malé náměstí, which is right next to the big square, or as some call it, the Old Town Square. And nowadays, restaurant patios, a pedestrian zone, but just recently, and I mean 2012, if we look at the aerial image, this was a parking lot. And the evidence is not only from above, but also still on the ground. You can still see the blue paint from the residential parking spots that was painted here, and you can still see the evidence of it. But once again, I think this is much better than a big parking lot on a small square. This probably won't be a shocker for Czech people, but for you foreigners, it may be. We're on the Charles Bridge, and now it's obviously only for pedestrians, but back in the days, cars were roaming around until 1965. My dad says he remembers driving as a kid across the bridge. And not only cars, even trams were allowed, and they had a special system where the electricity wasn't coming from above, but from the rail below. They were here for a very short period of time, but nowadays, just pedestrians, and we can only be reminded of the car era on the bridge through some really cool historical pictures. This is Malostranské náměstí, but it can be called a Trendsetter Square in terms of turning parking lots back into squares. This parking lot, believe it or not, was only reserved for parliament members or for their cars. But in 2016, the city said, enough, we want the square back for people and not for cars. Right now it may look empty, but twice a week there are different markets, different restaurants open their stands and stalls, so you can really enjoy being here. And this place sort of became a precedence for other places. Let me show you. And we've moved to a square, which is in front of the city hall, and this square was also a big parking lot for politicians, for the ones that work at the city hall. And just recently, in 2020, they have turned it into a pedestrian zone, into an actual square where you can sit and do something. Funny enough, after they got rid of all these parking spaces, they created one new one right over there just for them. So they didn't get rid of all of them. I mean, they did, but they created one special new one just for them. Kind of funny. Up on the hill behind us are the Strahov dormitories, and if we look at the aerial images, you can see that it used to be a parking lot between the buildings. But since many students live there, they turned it into sports fields. And now this is where our video breaks into showing the positive stuff to showing the other way around. In other words, places that used to be parks, so like the one you see behind me, and one that used to be here, but then in 2004, this was turned into a parking lot. Now, I don't want to sound harsh towards the automobiles because obviously people live here and they need to park somewhere, but it is the opposite of the trend, turning a park into a parking lot. Even though right here, a giant park is right over there, so I can understand it. But there's much more bizarre change just over there that we would like to show you. We are in the heart of Prague now, literally steps away from the Charles Bridge. And if you look at the area around me from aerial view, in the pictures from 1999, you can see that this was a running circle because we're right next to a sports house. But if you look at the most recent pictures, you can see that it looks like a parking lot. And even if you look around, it looks like a parking lot. But believe it or not, it is not a parking lot because our city plan does not allow a parking lot to be here. And when we found out this information, we actually looked around for the signs, and there's not a single sign that would say a parking lot. It says that this is a place where you can place your car, but not a parking lot. So that machine over there, you don't pay your parking ticket, you pay the ticket for placement of your car. How cool / bizarre is this? And to underline the bizarreness of this place, there's also this sign that forbids you from roller skating, bike riding, skateboarding, and also no running because the running circle is gone, even though this is a Czech sports federation. We have moved to one of the Prague riversides, and the building behind me is the governmental building. By the way, just recently they reconstructed their gardens and they're open to public every Saturday, so make sure to visit. But we're not here for that change, we're here for a parking related change. And that happened right here behind me. This riverside used to be car-free, no cars were allowed to park here. But then one day, someone has changed it. And the way they changed it was with this traffic sign. See, this traffic sign not only says that nobody can enter, but also that nobody can park here. But at the bottom, the white sign says, except for people who are allowed by the government. Now, the white sign a couple years ago was in the middle, so it only adjusted the entrance. So you could only enter if you had permission from the government, but then the no parking was still valid for everyone. But once you move the white sign at the bottom, people who are allowed by the government can also park here. I hope this really illustrates my obsession with parking signs. So I really think this is kind of bizarre because the government should go as an example to people and should not reserve an entire riverside street for their parking only. Now, if you think that what you've seen so far was interesting, I hope we will blow your mind right now. We're on the street that leads up to the castle and all the tourists walk up here. And if we look at aerial images from back in the days, you can see that there was many parking spaces. And then the city decided, how about we extend the sidewalk, losing some parking spots, but extending the area. So you can see that behind me and also from the aerial images. But then someone said, nah, that was not a good idea. Let's go back. And that's exactly what they did. So they built a brand new sidewalk, extended it, and then they brought cars back to the same spot, parking them on the sidewalk. Now, the argument here by the politician who has decided this backwards change was that the locals wanted more parking spots and that they were sorry that they lost them. Well, we actually spoke to many locals that live here and that we know, and they said that this argument is absolutely ridiculous and that they would rather have back the new extended sidewalk rather than few extra parking spots. Also, speaking of residential parking, many of the cars parked here are not locals, and many of them are hotel guests that simply have permission to temporarily park here. Now, I don't want to be a judge here and say if this is a positive or a negative change, but if there's something I really hate, it's waste of money, waste of material. And if somebody build a new sidewalk and then paint it on the same spot where cars were parked before, a place where you can park on the sidewalk, it's just pure stupid. Even though throughout the video I was referring to some of the changes as positive and some negative, I'm actually looking forward and curious about your opinion. So if you can share it below in the comments, and also if you can maybe share some examples from the city where you live. If it's in Europe, if it's in US or Australia, I don't care, I don't know. But if you have an example of a change which was a car place and now it's a pedestrian place, or the other way around, I'm actually very curious to look at those examples. This was Honza and Janek. We are the honest guys here from Prague. And if you're curious about more videos, we make them every week here on our channel. And I'll see you here next week. Ahoj! As always, here's the Czech word at the end, this time how to say development. To develop something, it's rozvoj. Rozvoj is development.